A scientist, motivated to give a second chance to humanity which is on the brink of extinction, will end up discovering extraordinary secrets about the creation of life and the history of planet Earth itself. Right at the beginning of the film, we learn that the world is ending. 3 years ago, the first case of a plant virus was recorded, spreading throughout planet Earth and devastating most of the ecosystems. To make matters worse, it was recently discovered that people who ingest food infected with this virus develop very serious diseases. In addition, the decrease in the amount of plants has caused the oxygen content of the atmosphere to decrease to only 18%. With the forests disappearing rapidly, the remaining plants cannot process enough carbon dioxide, the famous CO2, to maintain this level for long, and when the oxygen level falls below 10%, the human race will begin to suffocate. Our planet is dying, but humanity still has a chance of survival. The Gemini project, which revolves around an archaeological discovery 8 years ago, where 2 objects of extraterrestrial origin with an estimated age of 4 billion years were found. Then, Dr. Stephen Ross, who developed the Gemini project, is shown. In a lecture inside a cave, he tells about the devices that appeared on Earth even before life, saying that they managed to reproduce the 2 objects, which are an engine and a sphere. The engine is designed for interstellar flights through dimensional warp and allowed an unmanned rocket to go to the test solar system to look for a planet suitable for terraforming, and the machine came back with information and samples that confirmed the theories. The sphere is even more impressive. It is capable of creating life. The object uses chemicals from the environment to perform this miracle, which confirms that life on Earth was created by this machine. With this, he concludes that a team of scientists and military personnel is preparing for this mission to take the sphere to a planet with the right conditions to create Earth 2.0. While the ship takes off, we see a woman watching from afar with a crying face. The vehicle arrives in space and continues its journey. Inside, when Dr. Peter Lehman checks the engine with another scientist, his colleague questions what he thinks of the theory that the sphere was created by a lost civilization. But Peter says that they don't have enough data, so it's just speculation. But the other guy says that they know from experience that highly developed civilizations tend to self-destruct. When they leave, we see that the sphere has started to undergo some changes on the bottom. In the cockpit, the crew prepares for humanity's first spacefold jump. Stephen puts on an MP4 player, the others also hold their charms, including the earth-moving specialist, Dr. Leona Redwood, who holds a magic cube, which is not exactly a cube, but let's not get into geometry here. Peter activates the warp drive, and the ship begins to enter a giant portal into space. We see that the change in the sphere begins to fade, and during the jump, the spaceship's panel begins to indicate a critical error. Elsewhere in the universe, the ship exits the portal, which soon disappears. Inside, everyone is passed out, and when they wake up, Stephen asks if they have reached Tess. They realize that they have completed the jump, but a crew member checks the space map and warns them that they are not at Tess. The scientist then questions Peter about what happened, but Peter replies that everything was normal and the procedures were done according to protocol. Stephen says that if that were the case, they would be in the right place now. When Peter asks for permission to check the engine, Stephen denies it and sends him to the dorm until further notice. In a flashback, we see that Stephen was checking the sphere when he notices an apparition of some kind of spectral being. Back to the present, he asks the pilots to check the trajectory of the jump to try to find out where they are, but one of them warns that it's not possible because the trajectory is not clear, and the data doesn't make sense. They have entered the 4th dimension but basically moved on a Cartesian axis that is not accessible and then returned to 3-dimensional space. They just don't know where. Meanwhile, Peter arrives at a location on the ship and turns off a security camera. In the cabin, they comment that there is nothing familiar around that can help calculate their location, and so they can't go back until they know where they are. Suddenly, the panel warns that the airlock in the engine repair compartment has been opened. They try to communicate, but no one answers. The warning changes to unidentified object approaching, but looking outside, Stephen doesn't see anything unusual until Peter's frozen body hits the cabin glass. They go to the repair compartment where Leona is crying with the news, and another scientist comments that Peter must have checked the engine against Stephen's orders and realized what he had done, so he threw himself into space. But Leona refuses to believe this, saying that she knew Peter for more than 8 years, and he wouldn't give up so easily. Stephen tells her not to defend the guy because now they have to deal with the consequences of his mistakes since he put at risk the lives of several people and humanity's last hope of survival. Back in the cabin, Assistant David looks at the picture of his daughter and tells her that when she left, he wanted to give up everything, but then he thought he could bring meaning to something and decided to dedicate himself to the mission. But now he feels more useless here than on Earth. Stephen consoles the guy by saying that they will find a way out because the future of Earth depends on them, and giving up is not an option. He should have told Peter that, don't you think? The pilot, on the other hand, is trying to track the movement of the stars and nearby planets to see if he can calculate the ship's position with this. Stephen then receives from David the tablet that is carrying the information from the probe that was sent to the closest planet, and the data is encouraging. The environment is not so aggressive. Basically, they will only need oxygen masks to land on this planet. The conditions are even better than on Tess, so the scientist realizes that they were either very lucky or they were sent there on purpose by whoever left the sphere for humanity. He tells Major Ryan to prepare for landing because they can complete the mission on this planet. But the Major doesn't think it's safe to do so without having examined the place. Stephen says that if they send the sphere to this planet, they will have time to find out where they are and return the information to Earth, so other ships can repeat this jump. Pilot Richard warns that they don't know if they can make a safe landing, and the Major agrees with the pilot, saying that the scientist is being reckless. But Stephen says that he is the one who makes the final decisions, and that they will land anyway. The ship approaches the planet, and we see that there are electrical storms in the atmosphere. The lander separates from the rest of the ship and prepares for descent. They reach the stratosphere and continue descending until the pilot, who stayed in the ship, controlling the lander remotely, tells them that he has detected the storm. The winds are 0.025 miles per second. Suddenly they lose control, and the module reaches a speed twice as high as it should, which means they are falling. The pilot tries to reduce the speed aerodynamically in the hope of not destroying the hull of the vehicle. They then hit a rocky surface and finish the crash landing. Stephen is shown a flashback with the girl who observed the takeoff. They are in a yard that still has some plants. He calls the girl Amy, and they have a romantic moment when he gives her a bracelet made of a piece that got completely detached from the sphere. Stephen calls her to come in because the sprinklers are going to turn on soon. But Amy asks him to stay a little longer, and the scene ends with the couple being wet by the sprinkler jets while kissing. Back in the present, reality is more tense. The module has stopped near a cliff. The pilot warns that there is no critical damage, but they are almost out of fuel. Leona complains about being stuck there, but Stephen is still optimistic. He wants to take the sphere to a nearby cave big enough to protect the device. They carry the sphere in some tool bags, but before they leave, we see a gooey substance just below where the sphere was. They arrive at the cave and make their preparations. Meanwhile, the pilot finds some kind of goo on the walls of a hallway, and looking around, he also finds a camera. In the cave, the sphere is already open and projecting a ray of light, apparently working as expected. Then, everyone goes back to the module where Major Ryan warns that they are entering martial law and shows a video sent by the pilot. It was a video recorded by Peter, where the guy says he will check the engine even disobeying Stephen's orders and turned off the security camera to not be disturbed. His goal is to prove he did nothing wrong, but after making some connections in the reading device, Peter hears a strange noise, and suddenly he is attacked by some creature that starts to cause interference in the recording. Pilot Richard warns them that from the ship's recordings, the life form appeared soon after they left Earth. They compare it to the story of the Trojan horse and start calling the life form Trojan. So, the scientists believe that it was this creature that caused the failure of the jump. Leona says that Richard is in danger, but the pilot says that it's okay because the Trojan apparently came down with them in the sphere, and it's possible to track the position of this creature through the interference it causes in the electromagnetic field. At this moment, David says that he got the first data from the cave. The CO2 and oxidation levels inside the sphere are rising, but there are no biomarkers. Basically, the sphere is working, but with a different programming than the one they made. Stephen calls the crew to go back to the sphere and correct the error, but Ryan says that they have to deal with the threat first. For the sake of survival, the Major puts himself in command of the crew in Stephen's place. When confronted by Leona, Ryan tells her that Dr. Stephen was not truthful about the sphere and asks Richard to show a video of the cave where Stephen witnessed the anomaly, which means that he knew about the danger of the sphere but didn't tell anyone, risking everyone's lives. When the scientist says that it wouldn't make sense to have discussed the anomaly, the Major says that if they had known about it, they would have treated the sphere differently, and maybe Peter would be alive. In another flashback, Stephen is shown talking with David, who tells him that he was released to participate in the mission. Stephen thinks that David is not ready to fly because he has just lost his daughter and should have time to mourn, but David assures him that he will be fine and wants to help change the future. In the present, Stephen goes to David to ask for help. He plans to sneak out with David, ignoring Ryan's orders while the Trojan is out of the cave, so he can reconfigure the sphere while there is still time. David is reluctant, but Stephen argues that the planet is suffering from the same virus that took David's daughter, and that this is the only chance to save these lives. They then go to the cave and the light emitted by the sphere turns red. Stephen comments that it is creating an alien life form faster than when it created life on Earth. David says that the Trojan is getting closer, but Stephen still needs some time. David pulls him by the arm, but he knocks him down, telling him to move away. He then shoots up, saying that the mission is over, and then starts shooting the sphere. Stephen aims at David, ordering him to drop the gun, but it's too late. The Trojan has already arrived at the cave. They hide for a while and then run away. When they are almost caught up, They finally enter the module where they hear sounds of the creature crashing outside while the lights flash. In the decompression chamber, David questions why Steven hasn't fired, and Steven replies that he will fire the next time David threatens the mission. When the chamber opens, they encounter Ryan, who confronts Steven. But the scientist says that they did what they had to do and even questions whether Ryan will use brute force to keep himself in command. The Major then punches the scientist, but suddenly, an alarm is triggered warning that the integrity of the module has been compromised. Leona wakes up with the alarm, gets out of bed, and walks down the hallway where the climate is weird. The lights are flashing, and she steps on some goo dripping from the ceiling. At a crossroads of corridors, someone pulls her from behind. It's another crew member who tells them to be quiet because the Trojan has entered the ship. They arrive in a laboratory where they realize it's hard to breathe. The fans turn off, and they hear a strange noise in the place. The man tells Leona to back off and try to escape. As she runs out into the hallway, the door closes, and she hears the guy screaming inside. Leona goes through another door and finds the others. The Major is still hostile with Steven. He also realizes that the main generator has been damaged and they have lost the signal from the cameras. Steven checks a video recorded from the ship that shows that the Trojan entered through the cooling unit where the metal is thinner, which means that this creature could be intelligent. Dr. Steven suggests that someone goes to the distribution panel to redirect the power from the remaining generators to the cameras, and since this is all his fault, the scientist himself sets out on this risky mission. He walks through the corridors of the module until he reaches the panel where he connects the device to make the necessary change. The others receive the images from the camera and map the location and realize that the Trojan is approaching Steven. The scientist stops in a corridor waiting for the creature, but is soon pulled back by Ryan, who was tied to a rope to rescue the doctor. Steven realizes that the Trojan is causing even stronger interference in the electromagnetic field, affecting electronic devices, so he has an idea to lure the alien out of the module. The plan is to use Steven as bait to take the creature outside through the decompression chamber. To access the chamber, it is necessary to isolate the creature in a nearby corridor, and this is Ryan's job, who attracts the creature by making noise and closes the door when the creature arrives. David and another crew member are directed to other openings of the module where they can help Steven to get back inside. And Leona is in charge of opening the decompression chamber and then hiding in a side maintenance room so the Trojan can go straight through when the corridor door is opened. The last step will be to activate the module's engine, with the little fuel that remains, to hit the creature when it passes close to the thruster. Everything seems to be going well when Leona hides, but just as the creature is about to reach Steven, the vehicle's controls stop working, making it impossible to start the engine. In desperation, Leona goes out to shoot the Trojan, but unfortunately, it is at this moment that the engine starts, hitting the scientist. Steven's only option is to run to the other entrance of the module, and he narrowly escapes, but the thing still manages to eliminate another crew member and injure David before the door closes by cutting one of the tentacles. With the failure of the plan, they repair what they can in the module, and another flashback is shown. In the flashback, Amy asks Steven not to leave on this mission, but the launching day is almost near and he can't leave now. She then reveals that she is pregnant and that she is also about to develop a vaccine to stop the virus, so they can save the Earth instead of building a new one. But unfortunately, they can't wait for the vaccine to be ready because humanity could be extinguished in that time, and Steven can't abandon the chance to save humanity to be with his beloved and future son. Back in the present laboratory, Steven is studying the tentacle and the bacteria that infected David after his injury. He realizes that the Trojan is a biological robot made of the same material as the sphere, and that the structure changes when in contact with water. But he also comments that the bacteria in David has an extraordinary defense capacity, and this could be the key to developing a vaccine against the virus on Earth. Ryan arrives at the door, and Steven tells him that the creature is a biological robot and says they should eliminate the creature and reconfigure the sphere. But the Major does not put more faith in him because he has risked many lives as if people were disposable. He then locks the laboratory from the outside, declaring that Steven is under custody. Inside, David comments that Steven doesn't really care about people, he just wants to be a hero. In the past again, Steven talks to Amy about her research. They are really promising, but he is still willing to do the mission and tells her to tell the child how he was like a god, recreating life in another world. Amy, in turn, says that he has this paranoia of saving the world but doesn't seem to care about the people around him. All that matters to him is this project. He says that what matters is their future, but she remains angry and takes off the bracelet he gave her before. In the module, Steven talks to Richard about the calculation of the trajectory of nearby stars. The pilot tells him that nothing came of it, so the scientist talks about what was said before, that they moved on an axis that was inaccessible in three-dimensional space. But what if they didn't move in space exactly? Steven then asks Richard to redo the calculations to compare them to 4 billion years in the past. Then everything starts to make sense when he starts to recognize the patterns and constellations around them. realizing that that planet is actually the Earth itself. So they didn't really move in space but in time. The scientist comments that the sphere that was left there to create life on the planet was left by themselves and is the same sphere they found in the future. Steven wants to find a way to communicate with Amy to pass on the data that can help finalize the vaccine. To do this, he needs her to find a way to connect with them through the sphere. Then he has the idea of using the bracelet because he realized that the fragment that came out of the object when David shot it was the same that he used to make the bracelet for her in the future. So he starts to work on the message, hoping that Amy still wants to come back to him and get the bracelet back. We see Amy in the cave at this point. She walks among the scientific equipment and then reads a post about the mission of the Gemini project. In the module, Ryan is preparing some explosives, and Richard tells Steven that the Major is planning to blow up the sphere. Since Ryan's radio is off, Richard opens the lab door remotely so Steven can go talk to him. The guy is determined to blow up the sphere together with the Trojan, but the scientist warns him that it won't happen. Ryan wants to at least catch the creature, but Steven says it wouldn't help because the sphere would continue to alter the environment for the Trojan's survival. When the Major decides to listen to the scientist's suggestion, he is hit by a shot and falls on the spot. Steven sees that it is David who is overcome by the infection, saying that he will stop Rita's suffering if he stops humanity from being created. After a few shots of both, the scientist throws Leona's toy to distract his opponent and manages to wound the guy, saying that people deserve a chance. But David says that people don't change while leaving through the corridor. Steven gets up and sets off an explosive to detonate in 5 minutes, goes outside, and fires a flare in the middle of a storm to try to call the creature's attention. He goes back to the module and closes the door to gain time when the Trojan arrives, but on the other side of the hall, David appears trying to hit Steven, who hides in a corner. Soon, the creature destroys the door. David backs up, and the Trojan faces Steven. When the scientist reaches a room, David attacks him by surprise, knocks the guy down, and aims at him but hesitates to finish. At this moment, the Trojan catches David from behind, and Steven shoots more steam pipes to escape from there. And I think it is very convenient that there are these pipes everywhere to help the protagonist. The guy manages to escape from the module while the vehicle explodes with the creature inside. From the ship, Richard tries to contact the crew. Steven replies, saying that he eliminated the Trojan, but he is the only one left in the crew. Richard wants to land the rest of the ship to rescue the scientist, but he says it's not possible because of the storm and tells him to wait for it to pass. So Steven walks through the storm until he reaches the cave and connects the device to the sphere in order to rebuild the correct configuration, bringing back the ray of light from before. Amy finds the message on the bracelet and goes to the cave to apply the code to the sphere. The environment around her changes, and the two can see each other through time but cannot touch. He tells her that he is in the distant past, then explains that her vaccine is on the right track and gives her the missing formulas to complete the antigen. Then he takes off his mask to say goodbye with a symbolic kiss before ending the temporal connection. The movie ends with Amy working in the laboratory where the plants have bloomed again as they should, apparently free of the virus, and we also see that their son has already been born. Fortunately, the world still has a future for this child. Your support means everything to me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this.